What's up, everybody? Sujit Patel here. We're back at the virtual summit. Today, I'm talking to Laura Sicola. I'm really excited to talk to you today because, first of all, I've probably been doing all the things you say in your TED Talks, in your book, wrong. Her book is her book is Speaking to Influence, Mastering Your Leadership Voice. And Laura's going to talk to you about leadership communication and really a lot more. And this is all, if you guys get the theme of this, we're tackling sales from different angles. You heard about listening, you've heard about social selling, you've heard about cold calling, manage your team, what have you. So at the end of the summit, we hope you can master the sales. Without further ado, Laura, thank you again for joining. Would you mind giving everybody a quick intro on yourself and your background?
Sure. Thank you again, Susan, for having me. This is really exciting. I love working with salespeople, love working with entrepreneurs, people who are the brains behind the operation, but realize that if they're really going to have the success that they want, they have to be the face and the voice in front of it. You can't just know it all up here. If you can't get it out in a way that everybody else is going to go, oh, I totally get it, then you're missing the mark. People have to get it, and which means they have to get you. And the way that you communicate your message is going to make that initial connection stick and open the floodgates to all sorts of other kinds of opportunities, connections, and hopefully sales and long-term relationships, or it's going to send people in the wrong direction right from the get-go. So that's where I really hope that we can make a big difference today. You know, my background, I'm a linguist. So it's all about looking at the way the brain processes language and speech, and also the mental, the emotional, the psychological filters that we have that influence the way we interpret what we hear and the way we try to frame stuff, which sometimes doesn't work. And the question then is, why doesn't it work? Why is there a gap between what I think I say and what you think you hear, right? Why is it sometimes that you don't get it when I talk? Why don't you see the brilliance? Or why are you defensive when I don't understand when I think I'm being nice? All that stuff. So when we can boil it down and figure out what's actually causing that disconnect, you reverse engineer it, and that's where the magic happens.
Awesome. And in your book, you talk about the importance of establishing credibility, and getting people to buy into you before they buy into the product. Can we talk a little bit about that? Like, what are the factors, I guess, into credibility or people buying into you? I'm sure there's a lot, but kind of how do we get into this?
Sure. So there's two levels, right? There's the why it matters, and there's the so what do we do about it part. Mm-hmm. And on the one hand, with the why does it matter? I mean, think of it this way. I'm a leadership communications coach. So if I were talking to you and I said, so I'm Laura Sicola and my company is Local Impact Productions, and I work with a lot of startups and groups like Comcast. I was at Comcast today. I did a training there. And see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Like, everything I said is true. I was actually just at Comcast a couple of hours ago, but you're listening and you're going, okay, I don't know why she'd lie, but I don't get it. Like, really, that's what she does? That's what, like, there's a disconnect. I'm just not buying it. You have to buy into me as the representative of my product, my service, my company, before you're going to buy my product or my service or buy something from my company. So you are your product. The investors and venture capitalists and others that I work with have an expression, bet the jockey, not the horse. Mm-hmm. So you can have an awesome horse, an awesome product, but if the jockey who's steering it, who's driving, who's riding it, doesn't really know what they're doing, that horse is not going to win. So you can have the best product in the world, but if you as the rep, as the salesman, as the representative, doesn't really seem to get it, it's like, I'm not buying into you, so I'm not going to give you money for your product either. So it's really critical to set that first connection and having people buy into you. Make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, especially when you kind of just set it out loud. I'm like, oh, yeah, it totally makes sense. I've had so many sales calls where like the person on the other end just doesn't sound, maybe not enthusiastic, or I don't hear it in their voice that they care.
And we can talk about that later on. So like for every now and then I'll get a cold call and it'll be somebody who I can tell within 8 seconds is actually in 8 words, which is about 2 seconds, that they're reading from a script. And I'm just going, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Call, because they don't even sound like they know what they're talking about. It's like this robotic, disembodied voice. If your heart's not in it, like, why am I going to spend time with you on the phone right now? It's like, I got to go. Thanks. So
that makes sense. So you talk about the why. Let's jump into the like where it starts. So yes, you have a problem, you're aware, you want to improve this. Where do you start even tackling this?
Sure. What creates that credibility image is the ability to align three different channels all at the same time. If you think about it like a triangle,
Mm-hmm.
and each point is a different channel, all the points have to meet, right? They all have to connect to make one solid triangle and solid shape. And when you're speaking, your message is that triangle, is that shape. And you want your audience to really focus on what you mean, what you intend, what the importance is, what you need them to get out of it. But the three channels that you're communicating in all at the same time are your verbal channel, which is the words, the content, the what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
The second channel is the vocal channel, which is the sound of those words as they come out, not just the transcript. The transcript or the script is your what. The voice gives the color to all of it. And then the third channel is the body language or the physical communication, the visual. Now, when you're on the phone, you have much less visual to go on. It still influences, and we can get to that in a little while, but your verbal, which is your words, your vocal, which is your voice, and your visual, which is your body language, when they all match up, you inherently come across as more credible, more authentic, more authoritative, more believable, and you're going to make that connection much more easily. But when they're off, what you see is what I demonstrated a moment ago, where it's like, yeah, I'm a leadership communications coach, and I work with executives. What? Doesn't matter that what I said is right, is correct. You don't care, because that disconnect is just making you go, yeah, I'm good, thanks. So that's what people will pay attention to. They ignore your what, and they focus on the how. When it doesn't match, you lose your credibility.
Gotcha. So one of the things we talked about in our prep call, and I think you mentioned this in your book, is about people even being able to hear your, the part of the triangle they can't see over the phone, right? So they can see body language, your expressions. How does that happen? How do you get that?
So to everybody out there who makes sales calls on the telephone where you're not looking at them, there's no eye contact, do not be lulled into a false sense of security, because you are not hiding from anybody. People can absolutely hear what you look like. They can hear your posture. They can hear what your eyebrows are doing. They can hear whether or not you're smiling. They can hear all sorts of stuff, because the muscles all have an influence on the sound of the voice. So let's try an experiment. Will you play with me for a second?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I want you to close your eyes, and
right.
I'm going to say a sentence twice.
Okay.
And the only difference between the two is that one time I'm going to raise my eyebrows, and one time I'm going to lower them as I say it. I'm not going to tell you which is which in advance. I want you to listen to them both, and then when we're done, you're going to tell me which one had eyebrows up.
All right, so here's where everyone can see. I'm not looking.
Okay, right? And here we go. I'm going to say, let's see. Did Jimmy tell you what happened in school today? Round 2. Did Jimmy tell you what happened in school today?
All right, so tell you which one now?
Yep.
All right. I want to say the second one.
Was which? Up or down?
Up.
So why? Okay. Tell me why. What did you hear?
You kind of had a pause where the voice went up, or kind of slowed down towards the end when you emphasized what would happen in school today. I think that's. So
it's interesting, because the second one was technically down. The first one was up. And if you go back when you play, the fact is you can hear a difference in the two. And most people will end up giving a separate, will interpret it differently, whether they think it's up or down. So for example, when it was up, the pitch was a little higher. So it was, did Jimmy tell you what happened in school today? As opposed to, did Jimmy tell you what happened in school today? You actually have this sort of ripple effect in your muscles where you pitch. Now, what's important is that not only will people hear it different, whether they guess if it's up or down doesn't matter. It's how they interpret what they think you mean by it. And even when I do that in groups and people can hear the difference, when I ask which one or what did you interpret from each, some people will say, well, when the eyebrows were up, it sounded good. And when the eyebrows were down, it sounded heavy. And others will say, no, actually, the first one, when the eyebrows were up, it made me concerned, like, uh-oh, this is really big news. And the other one was like, oh, it's just a little something. So
Yeah.
whether or not the physical was correctly interpreted, the fact is they hear a difference, and it
Right.
gives them a feeling in their gut. So, and it's the same when you're smiling or when you're frowning. They can hear all this stuff, and it sends signals that makes them interpret things right or wrong. So you have to be really careful about what you're doing, even with your face.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Yeah. I totally heard two different tones, and I heard two different meanings and emphasis. And I, like, in my head, I was like, somebody's in trouble, or like, this is like, someone's like in deep crap, right? Like trouble and like someone got a bad grade or someone's expelled, right? Like that level of difference in the tone.
So
So
for you, it wasn't even a matter of like, guess what? He's on the honor roll.
yeah, I mean, it just sounded like a tone. Well, we're doing an example, so I figured something extreme. So I guess my mind went to that, but I want to back up.
That's the point, right? Because your mind went in a certain direction based on what you heard. And this is what we have to be aware of, is that you don't know what your audience is thinking about, but the inflection is going to have a trigger for them.
Absolutely. I want to back up a second to your TED talk. In your talk, and we'll link it here in the notes in the bottom.
Yeah.
You talk about saying your name right, and so many people get it wrong. So can we jump into that? Like, I feel like that's such a simple thing. How do you get your name wrong? And I have to share something with you afterwards. But yeah, what's your take? How does this work?
Sure. So, most people feel like they're not really great at remembering names. And the fact is that part of the reason that happens is because when most people introduce themselves to you, they do pronounce their own names wrong. And what I mean by that is that they have three mistakes that they make that make it more difficult for your brain to process and retain what they've said. Number one, they say it too fast. They blur it through. Hi, I'm Laura Sicola. Like, by the time you even realize the person's talking, you totally missed whatever it was. Number two, rhythm or cadence. There isn't any. It's just a giant slur of sound that goes by. And once again, you sort of heard something, but you just can't really parse out what the pieces were. And number three is the tonality pattern, which is the highs and the lows in your intonation. If anything, either people tend to say it really fast and blurred and straight through, like Laura Sicola, or they ask it like it's a question, which is weird. Hi, I'm Laura Sicola. Like, I think. Like, well, how about you figure it out and then get back to me? Because until you do, then I don't really have time for this. So what you want to do instead, number one, is slow down. Most people, especially on the phone, like, they're not even really tuning in until like 3 or 4 seconds in. So if you just blow through your name real fast, they don't even know what it was. So slow it down to the point where you feel like it's oddly slow for you to say, but you already know it. It's not oddly slow for someone who not only hasn't heard it, but can't predict it. So whether your name is generic, like Ann Smith, or a little more colorful or longer or whatever else, you need to slow it down that much more. Number two, the pace and the cadence. Break it up. My name has 2 parts, Laura Sicola. We need to make sure that there's a little break in the middle that lets me hear where one stops and where one ends. And so I met somebody this morning whose name was Aylin, but she'd introduce herself and say, hi, I'm Maylin. So everybody would call her Maylin. It wasn't Maylin. It said there was no break. So they couldn't hear I'm Aylin. Now that's not first name and last name, but just the fact that the words are blurring together, people weren't really sure what they were hearing. So you got to help them break it out. And then the third is the tonality. Your first name goes up and your second name should come down. It's like putting a period at the end of the sentence. Laura Sicola. Up, pause, and down. That way people know, and now I'm done. And there's 2 pieces. Pay attention to them and slow it down. So instead of, hi, I'm Laura Sicola, my company's Vocal Impact Productions. Hi, I'm Laura Sicola with Vocal Impact Productions. Slow it down, make sure there's 3 pieces for the company, 2 pieces for the name, and that makes it so much clearer. I had a friend who did this with his company and with his name, and he's on the phone all the time making sales calls, and he said, I can't believe something this stupid make that much of a difference. I don't have to repeat my name anymore when I'm on the phone with people. Nobody asked me to repeat it. It's like, there it is. You can call it stupid, you can call it simple, call it what you want, but hey, it works. So there you
That's
go.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Embarrassing story and you probably were on the other end of this. So when we did our prep call, or I guess this is a confession, when we were on our prep call, I ended as like, oh my God, I spoke to somebody who's awesome at linguistics, and I messed it up. I just came off of like 2-3 weeks of travel, and I was like catching up on work, and I introduced myself. I was like, this is what we're gonna say. Then I want to just give you context and whatever. And I was like, oh crap, I probably made every single mistake in the book. And then I watched your TED talk. I was like, oh crap, I made the mistakes you talk about. I even just couldn't say my name right. So important, right? And yet you showed up here, so thank you.
And it wasn't, yeah, you didn't screw up anything. It was a great prep call. Clearly, I'm here and this is a lot of fun. And there's usually when I tell people what I do, then all of a sudden they get very self-conscious. And I just let them know, actually, once you know what I do, I'm the one who needs to be self-conscious, because now, like in the back of your mind, let me analyze this and see if she's really living up to what she claims.
Yeah, it holds you some high standards, right? Absolutely. So
hey,
clearly,
your turn.
Sujin Patel. There you go.
Good. So slow it down and put a little more break in between.
Okay, so it's Sujin Patel.
There you go. So when you put it that way, and people are going to catch the two pieces, much easier for somebody else to process. Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. I wasn't expecting an interactive interview, so I usually get to ask. I usually get to put you on the spot. But anyways, so I want to jump into so you obviously the power of voice, very important. How people understand things, how you say things, what you emphasize even. But I want to put this into context for sales folks. So you mentioned something around if someone's reading from a script within the first 8 words. How the heck do you know that? Like, how can you tell?
It's very easy because the words are not their own. And when words aren't yours, then it's very hard to inflect them in a way that feels natural. And frankly, even if they are words that you wrote your own script, you've not been trained in Hollywood to write dialogue. You've been trained to write sales copy, websites, reports, proposals, research, who knows what code even, but not actual natural human dialogue. So even though you think you're writing in a conversational style, it's just a slightly less formal version of written speech. So people will usually, so for example, here's a red flag and a very easy tip for you guys to use and implement when you're writing your own scripts. Use contractions. Whenever possible, write in the contraction. And that means everything from instead of I am to I'm, or we are to we're, as well as things like wanna and gonna. Because even though I'm sure like in the back of your brain, you can feel your 6th grade English teacher going, no, don't do that. The fact is, it's not an essay. You're not going to pick up the phone and read your what I did on my summer vacation essay to your prospect, but it is the way you talk. And if you ever hear someone say, my name is Laura Sicola, and I am going to talk to you today about some, like how robotic and stiff and awkward. No one says, I am Laura Sicola. It's like, hi, I'm Laura Sicola. You don't say, I am going to talk to you, or I would like to. You say, I'm gonna, or I'd like to. Right. So just learning to write in those contractions is something that will help you come across more naturally. And most people don't know to do that. They think they should just use quote unquote good English, which is proper textbook, full sentence, full whatever else. But it's just not the way we talk. Even when you're talking more formally, it's not natural to talk like that. So you're going to give yourself away right from the beginning.
So one of my pet peeves is when folks use scripts and people, and especially when they give it to their sales team, everybody uses a script. First of all, scripts are and pitches are iterated on, right? So at any given point, somebody's gonna have an outdated version. But I think like you just said, like talking from not your own words, obviously you heard it from the expert, it's easy to tell, 8 words. But also, you have to formulate those thoughts in your own manner, right? So I like to give people like an outline of like, here's the talking points you should be hitting, and then giving them different talking points for different kind of customer personas. That way they have some ways to go off of. And like if they go and start this way in this persona and they realize, oh, actually that person's really analytical, I'm going to go switch to this. But if you had to go switch a script, it like you don't even know where you left off and going to a whole nother section. So it's my pet peeve, but it sounds like you agree, or that at least you don't want to at least get people to read off scripts.
No, totally. It's do you ever listen to Audible? Listen to books on audio versions? I
Yeah,
mean, they're the person who narrates it makes a huge difference in your experience, don't they?
absolutely. I try to get the books where the author is the one narrating it,
Yeah.
and I especially love the Gary Vee when he narrates at least some of his books. He's done that, and it's like I compare the book versus Audible. I'm like, it's really different. He didn't say that in the book, or like
Well,
it's
that's different if they're going to change the words completely, but it's but when he does it, you can feel it. He means every word. He's so passionate about it. I finished the book on the commute this morning, and I started a new one in the afternoon on the way home, and Melinda Gates and her book, The Moment of Lift, is what I just finished. And she narrates that from the heart. Every last word I felt in the way she was inflecting it. And then I started this other more business kind of book afterwards. It is painful. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish it because the
yeah.
guy who's reading it, he's got a nice enough voice. I'm sure he thinks he's a voiceover artist, but it's so mechanical and just there's inflection between like two notes over and over and over. I can't pay attention to it. He drones on, even though he thinks he's emphasizing stuff. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish because I can't focus. My mind keeps wandering, and it's all because of the performance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it's if you're droning off, it's not always the content, right? It's the you got to think about the triangle. So you remind me of the triangle again. So one
Yeah,
part of it's the
three
content, right?
V's.
The
Right.
three.
Think the three V's. Each corner of the triangle is a V, right?
Okay.
So verbal, the vocal, and the visual.
Oh, that's way easier to remember. Good. Okay, cool. So there you go. So going back to kind of implementing this for sales and talking about sales, our audience and generally salespeople of all, from all sorts have in-person meetings. Some of them have Zoom or video conferencing of some sort, some phone. Um, when you're talking about the different types of mediums, I guess, or even when you're talking to a group, one to many, um, I guess, like, is there different habits or different speech you should be doing, or I guess what's your take on, does it have to be different, or is it different?
Meaning, depending on the medium that you're using, should you adapt your speech?
Yeah, it's a better
Should
question.
you adapt your speech?
That's what I meant to say.
I guess where I would say is, I'm going to flip it around.
Okay.
You shouldn't uh, allow yourself to slack in some forms of speech more in some contexts more than others. Most people will adapt their speech when they're on the telephone, or the more digitally disconnected they are, because they feel like, well, they can't see me, so I can do this. Or, well, I'm reading a script over the phone, so I don't have to do that. And so your standards subconsciously end up being lower because you think you don't have to do certain things when you can't see. If anything, the fact is you have to keep your game up to your A game when you're on the phone, because the fact that in that triangle, if the verbal, the vocal, and the visual all count, but you can't really see the visual as much other than to the extent that it influences your vocal, then all that means is there's just that much more weight placed on the sound of your voice. So you really have to make sure that your emotion and it is reflected in your inflection. So if you want me to be excited about something, or if you want to show me that you're really compassionate about something, or that you recognize this is a real problem and you feel for me on it, or if this is something where we should be angry, this is a fundraiser because it's an activist, whatever issue it is, there's a reason to be angry, then I want to hear your fire in it. And especially if you're telling me that you hear me, if I'm the customer and I'm angry about something, I don't want to hear you go, well, I'm very sorry to hear that. And, we'll certainly be cautious about that in the future. And we appreciate your feedback. No, you don't. I
Yeah.
don't buy at all that you actually feel badly or that you empathize with why I'm angry about something or other. So your voice is that much more important to your being credible, because you either sound like you mean what you say or you don't. And that's it.
Right.
Because if you don't sound like you know what you say, they certainly aren't going to buy it.
Absolutely, yeah. So without the visual, the voice is the only thing they hear. So they have to make the visuals up, and so your voice, it's your voice has to do more work, right? Or like the vocal element has to be on its A game. Totally makes sense. Um, yeah, absolutely. I was just picturing like maybe reading your book, an audible version, and seeing you talk, right? Like different levels of energy. If
Exactly.
if I'm seeing you talk, like you've already got my respect. You're on the stage. So being on stage gets you like credibility to a certain level, right? And then everything else kind of either builds on top of it or takes away from it. In a book, I don't know who the heck you are. I've gotten at least enough to buy the book, open the book. That's a lot, right? That's like most people don't even read the book, right? Not your book, but just in general.
Of course, the world of read mine.
Books aren't read. They're bought, but not always read.
Very true.
And so, the audible version, it's like, okay, I'll give this a chance. And then if I don't get something in the first, whatever minutes, I'm like, okay, or the voice or the tone. And sometimes you want to give really good content a chance and you just, I can't, like you were just saying earlier with that audiobook book. But anyways, very, very impactful. I love it. So kind of on the flip side, we talked about a lot of bad habits. We talked about a lot of things you can do right, but what are some, I guess, like, what are some good habits? What are some like credible communication? Like, do you have any examples that you can share just about like good habits? Like how do we, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Good habits.
Okay, so let's start with a simple one. And conceptually, it's simple. It's surprisingly hard for a lot of people to remember to implement. And it is the very simple act of not having a run-on sentence, having multiple pieces of sentences where, just like when you're reading, I mean, you ever get the email from a friend or a text message from a friend that's like this long and it's just one giant rambling run-on, like you open it up and your eyes immediately go, whoa, what? I can't even process this. You ever have a friend like that?
Absolutely. I just had a conversation this morning with an employee and he sent one long Slack message and I was like, whoa, I hang on. I need a minute to even absorb this.
Yeah, like I need a diagram or something to parse out whatever you're talking about, because there's 75 things that just dumped into that one. I can't even call it a sentence. So that's how we tend to talk. Most people, they're like, okay, it's my turn. I have a general point I want to make, and there's like 6 pieces that I want to include in that, details or ideas or suggestions or challenges. So I'm just going to keep talking and running through it, as opposed to saying, well, this is first of all, there's this issue we need to address, period. Part of the reason it's important is because X, Y, and Z, which has this effect, period. Like, have your voice drop. That's the end of a sentence, like a period. And then that little split-second pause lets me know another sentence is going to begin. Imagine this. If you want people to take notes, hypothetically, on what you're trying to explain to them, they put a bullet, you talk, they're taking some notes. How do they know when to pick up their pen and make a second bullet? Or do they just have one bullet and it's like a whole page worth of detail and there's no second bullet?
Yeah, I bet that's like a pause, right?
A lot of them, hopefully, that you're going to hear that vocal period where it's going to drop. That lets people know, okay, I've finished the sentence. Then they're going to take a breath and start another one. And that sort of is a little vocal cue that lets you know, pick up your pen and put another bullet because she's about to say something else. So if you don't give people those auditory cues, then they're not just processing point A, point B, point C. They're going, okay, where is this person going with all this information? Because so far we've hit on everything from Melinda Gates to sales calls to I don't know whatever else, and where is she going with this?
Yeah.
So you have to give people auditory cues to help them identify your key points, help them process what you mean, and remember what you said. No run-on sentences.
I love it. I tend to like run on my thought because of any given reason, number of reasons. And I like, now I'm going to be super aware of when to break and pause and whatnot. So
it's hard on the sales call too, right? Because you're afraid that if you don't get out what you need to say fast enough, somebody might hang up on you. So you got to get out a certain amount, like in the first 8 seconds, even if technically it should be 20 seconds worth of information. You try to like smash it together as fast as possible. Your ability to finish a sentence is not helpful if they didn't understand any of it.
Absolutely. It kind of, I think what the first thing you say in a sales call is the same thing as like the subject line of an email, right? The objective of this whole sentence is just for people to continue. Like they're not going to be sold on one sentence unless you're saying, I'm gonna do something crazy and it's for free. And even then it's just like so many like red flags of like credibility, trust, all these other things, right? Like doubt. But yeah, the subject line of an email is just to get you to open it, so that when you read the rest of the email, or maybe even the first sentence of that email, so aka a second thing you say or third thing you say, it just gets people down the road. Now, at some point, you're gonna have to sell, but like I don't know about you, but I've never heard a sales call that happens where someone sells at the end when the person hangs up in the beginning, right? It's just not physically
Yeah,
possible.
they need a better job.
Exactly. So this has been awesome. That's really all the questions I had for you. I can go on, but for those of you watching, listening, what have you, check out Laura's book on speaking to influence, mastering your leadership voice. And also check out her TED Talk. Again, link below. 15-minute TED Talk, I think, will change the way you actually view voice and verbal communication. And one more time, the triangle, the V's. All right. So vocal, visual, and then verbal.
Yep.
What's the last
Verbal.
one? Verbal.
Right? The
Right.
verbal is the content. That's your what, right? So if you don't have good content, it doesn't matter how great your voice is and your delivery, because it's kind of like taking, like putting lipstick on a pig, right? It's kind of entertaining, but otherwise there's no real value to it. On the flip side, if you have great content, but bad delivery with your voice and your body language and whatever else, it's like taking a pearl and caking it in mud. There's good stuff in there someplace, but you just can't find it. So you need the good content as the structure, and then good delivery, the vocal and the visual, as the packaging that makes people want to open it up and find out what's inside.
Love it. Laura, where can people find you? Where can they learn more?
You can go to my website, vocalimpactproductions.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can take a look at the book, Speaking to Influence. If you go to speakingtoinfluence.com, you can actually get the first 2 chapters for free if you want to kick the tires a little bit and see what it's all about before going and buying that Audible copy. And to your earlier point, I do my own Audible recording. So if you could stand the first 25 minutes of me talking with you here today, then you can do the rest of the book for another couple of hours. But I had a lot of fun recording it, and I hope you have a lot of fun listening to it.
Thank you for joining.